Hello and welcome to this session on the ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET, Approaches for Pro Extensibility. My name is Christopher Zent and I'm a product manager on the desktop team, where I work closely with the Pro SDK team and help users that are learning ArcGIS Pro. Let's take a look at our session today. The Pro SDK and Approaches for your work will be our first section. We'll examine some of the fundamental approaches for extending Pro, covering select SDK and Pro API areas, and we'll discuss some practical considerations as you get started. Please note that this is a beginner level session, so it assumes that you may have not worked with the Pro SDK before or are just getting started. By approaches, we'll be discussing some of the different perspectives on extending Pro and some practical considerations. We'll then discuss some of the Pro extensibility patterns as you get started. We have 4 main patterns and we'll cover each one of those and some resources. We'll then take a look at some of the Pro APIs and how you get started with those in relation to how you're approaching your work. And then we'll look at some resources that are available for you right now as you get started. Okay, let's talk about extending ArcGIS Pro. So as you get started with Pro, you'll notice that there's a few options for you to actually extend it. One of the first traditional ways is through configuration. You can configure the user interface through different settings. You can even build full workflows through using Pro's tasks. The second way is to automate using geoprocessing and Python. And you can build all sorts of different Python scripts, as well as build different geoprocessing tools, which are very powerful and allow you to automate your work. And the third way is to extend Pro with your own custom tools and solutions. For this, you'll be using the ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET. So we use the term extend here because you're actually extending Pro beyond its out-of-the-box existing functionality. You're creating from scratch brand new tools using the SDK. Okay, so in terms of user perspectives, you may be coming from many different GIS development backgrounds and experience levels. The SDK has been built and designed for use with Microsoft.NET. You may have ArcObjects SDK experience, developing with traditional ArcGIS desktop with ArcMap and ArcCatalog, ArcScene and ArcGlobe. That experience will be very helpful as you move forward with the Pro SDK, and you'll see a lot of similarities. You may be new to ArcGIS entirely and you have a brand new GIS development project that you're getting started with. The SDK has been built to be an efficient experience and has lots of resources and community samples that you can take advantage of. Let's take a quick overview of the SDK itself. It's comprised of a set of templates and tools that are used in Visual Studio 2017 and 2019. We always support the 2 latest editions of Visual Studio. The SDK provides project and item templates that you can use right out of the box after you install in Visual Studio. So you'll be doing .NET desktop development, so you'll be able to take advantage of modern .NET standards for desktop, such as WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, MVVM, and asynchronous programming. And there's been a lot of efficiencies that have been built into the SDK, so you can get started right away with these, with a lot of different patterns and samples. Finally, our releases for the Pro SDK are directly in sync with the major releases for ArcGIS Pro. And at this time for Developer Summit, we're working with ArcGIS Pro 2.7, which was released back in December. And we'll be talking a little bit about some of the new capabilities that were made available there. So let's talk about some of the opportunities for extending ArcGIS Pro with the Pro SDK. First off, of course, you can add new functionality to Pro. Traditionally, this is creating new tools and routines, things that are going to make things much more efficient in the user interface for your users. And you'll be doing this through the addition of custom controls, dock panes, using different settings that are specific to your workflows. Next, you can streamline workflows with Pro. You can focus in on just those essential operations that allow your users to really do really quick and efficient work. You can tailor the user interface for your organization and specifically to the work that your users do. You can organize the ribbon with new and with existing tools and put those together in your add-ins, allowing your users to have an efficient and intuitive user interface. You can, of course, reduce clicks, repetitive tasks and operations, and really take advantage of building in your own logic to make it a really streamlined workflow. And there is a pattern we'll be talking about that allows you to do that. Finally, you can make Pro your own. You can control the startup user interface and user experience and use custom branding to give Pro the look that is unique to your organization for your users. And the configurations pattern that we'll be talking about is one of the best ways to do this. And to the right, you can see here the config with map configuration sample, and we'll be talking more about this and how you can get started with that. All right, so these are the extensibility patterns that are made available from the SDK. The first is traditional add-ins. Here you'll be developing new tools and functionality to extend ArcGIS Pro. The next is managed configurations. Here you'll get all of the capabilities of traditional add-ins, plus additional customization capabilities for the Pro user interface and user experience. The next is plugin data sources, where you can create custom data source integration with Pro. And then finally, core host apps, where you can create standalone apps for 64-bit geodatabase and geometry access. And below are just a couple screenshots of our community samples. The one on the left is the voxel layer sample add-in, community sample, and on the right, the plugin data source sample. Okay, so let's step back and take a look at what's possible with the SDK. On the left is a graphic of just some of the different API categories that are available with the SDK. As you can see, we've got some descriptions on the right-hand side for some of those. And I'll just skim over a few of these on the right-hand side. At the top is content, where you can manage Pro project items and connections to portal, consume and integrate online data. So many workflows that a lot of our users have been able to take advantage of content. Device location. This is a new API that was made available at 2.7. We'll mention this a little bit later. You can manage GNSS device connections such as GPS and visualize those positions and collect data and manage it. The editing API, here you can develop very powerful feature editing tools and create and manage 2D and 3D editing operations. So many different types of capabilities, extensions, framework, geodatabase, and geometry, geoprocessing, layouts, and map authoring. Map expiration. You can build and manage animations, control the camera, and build new map tools inside of Pro. Metadata, you can create custom metadata forms using the metadata toolkit. The new parcel fabric available at 2.7 can create editing tools, manage parcel seeds, types, and records. And there's many more API categories as you can see. Raster, real-time for working with stream layers, scene layers, sharing, tasks, topology, utility network, and the new voxel layers API. So, in taking a look at different approaches for Pro development, it's recommended that you start simple and expand. You can begin working with the SDK patterns and templates. Again, we'll be talking about these patterns here in our next section. Building on those patterns, you can then build in and use. You'll be working immediately with the Pro APIs. And based upon those different API categories which we just discussed, you can start to find which areas are most important for you. And then finally start building your add-ins using the different extensibility patterns that we're going to walk through. Okay, so let's discuss extensibility patterns. Okay, so each one of the extensibility patterns has its own template for Visual Studio. Each one of the templates provides its own basic framework for the user interface, a module, and the classes, the essential classes that are used as you get started with that template. Each one of the templates provides all the basic file components that you need to actually build that add-in and to use it inside of Pro. There's just one of the samples, the configuration template, which creates classes for the configuration manager. All right, so let's take a look at our very first extensibility pattern. We mentioned all four of these before, but we'll walk through each of these now in some detail. The first is traditional add-ins. This is where you'll be developing new tools and functionality to extend ArcGIS Pro. I just want to show you here a couple user interfaces from a couple of our business partners who have developed products using add-ins. The first here is DataMine and their Discover for ArcGIS Pro add-in. As you can see, it has created a brand new tab on the ribbon. This one is called Discover, and all of their tools have been organized here into different groups. All of these are new tools, and here they have a custom doc pane that's also been created as part of the add-in. Here's another partner add-in. This is the Planet ArcGIS add-in version 2. And they also have a custom tab on the ribbon with their tools. And one of these buttons opens up this Planet Image Search doc pane. And you can see they've built in all sorts of controls as well. This is just a couple examples of the capabilities of add-ins. Okay, let's talk about item templates. So just like the project templates for each one of the extensibility patterns, there are item templates provided by the SDK, which you use in Visual Studio to build out new user interface controls. There's a full item templates listing that's available on the documentation wiki. And here you can see each one of those templates listed out. Let's take a look at how you would add one. You'd have your solution open and you would just right click and go to add new item here in the Solution Explorer. That would pop open this add new item dialog. And if you're choosing, say, for example, the gallery item, that then would add the two files that you see here. And in using it within your add-in, that gallery could look something like this, which is from our graphic layers community sample. All right, so that's another major component of actually approaching these is using existing item templates. Build out your user interface. So how does a Pro add-in actually work? Well, it's going to extend Pro through those items that we mentioned, using those item templates to build out Pro buttons, tools, doc panes, controls, etc. to enhance the user interface. You're going to be building that custom functionality and tapping into the Pro APIs to build out the type of functionality that you need to streamline and build out your workflows. When you are ready, you compile your add-in, you build it, and that is then packaged within a single compressed file. That's going to have the Esri add-in X file extension that you can see here in this screenshot of Windows Explorer. This is the Animation Tools community sample add-in. When Pro then starts, it looks inside of these well-known folders, and this is just an example of the location, the default location, where this community sample is stored when it's compiled. Pro will look in those well-known folders and then load up the add-ins. The add-ins, of course, containing the DLLs and other resource files that you may be using and leveraging with your add-in. In the case of this animation tools sample, it creates two new control groups here on the animation tab. And then you use that with your sample data and get started with some of that new capability. So that's how an add-in works. It looks in those well-known folders and then loads up those capabilities. On the user interface, there is the Desktop Application Markup Language, or DAML, as we like to call it. And add-ins use DAML to define all of these different UI elements in Pro. And as you saw with that gallery example, there are many different files that are going to be part of your solution, but it's the config.daml file that is going to contain this XML type syntax for storing and creating this. And again, as Pro starts and it loads up the add-ins from those well-known folders, the first file that it reads from your add-in is this config.daml so that it can configure the user interface with all of your customizations. Let's take a look at just a couple of the samples here. You can see that there are two groups that have been defined, and those are going to be updating the animation tab. Here's group 1 and group 2. On group 1, it's got a caption of vehicle animation settings, as you can see right there. There's an edit box and a combo box. Next is group 2, which is the build animation group, and those are going to contain two buttons. Here you can see the button lines here, the speed keyframes button and the 10-second keyframes button here. Again, this is from the animation tools sample that you could try out. So with DAML, you can add, modify, and delete any user interface element from the ribbon. Okay, a quick note about installing add-ins. I just want to mention that the add-in extensibility pattern has been around with traditional ArcGIS Desktop or ArcMap since the 10.0 version. So this has been around for a while. What's nice about it is that it's very easy to use. It only requires a simple double click to install it once you have Pro installed. There's no administrator privileges that are required. There's no installation exe to run or build. There's no add or remove programs that you need to use here. Again, it's just simply the add-in is a zip compressed package that contains your DLLs, and Pro will look into the well-known folder to find the add-in and then load it up. Makes it very easy to use and install and distribute. Okay, so let's talk about some considerations for add-ins. So there's many opportunities. As you can see, add-ins themselves are very powerful, and they provide most of what your users are looking for in terms of customizations. Developers can customize the user interface by building new custom tools, buttons, and dock panes. You can build and incorporate your own custom processes with .NET, and you can integrate third-party libraries with your add-ins. Last, some considerations here and some questions that you would want to ask yourself when you're looking at future patterns that we're going to be covering. First is, do you need full control over the startup process of ArcGIS Pro? If you do, then you'll want to take a look at configurations, which is our next pattern. Do you have a data format that you want to use as a layer or a table inside of Pro? If that's the case, then you'll want to look at plugin data sources. And then finally, do you need to run a scheduled geodatabase process outside of Pro? If that's the case, you'll want to look at core host apps, which is going to be our last pattern. All right, our next pattern is now manage configurations. This provides all of the add-in capabilities that you've just seen, plus additional customization of the Pro user interface and user experience. Here you're looking at a screenshot of the Config with Start Wizard community sample. This is actually a start page for ArcGIS Pro. So it's very different looking than the traditional out-of-the-box start page, of course. What you're looking at is a list of different projects, packages that are available publicly on ArcGIS Online. So the start page has tapped into ArcGIS Online and has pulled these down in terms of their thumbnails and provided some links to open up these packages inside of Pro. So very interesting customization of the start page. And that just goes to show you what's possible with a configuration in that startup experience. Another configuration community sample that's available is the config with map sample. And this provides all of the different capabilities, shows you all of the different capabilities of a configuration. And some of the capabilities for the startup experience are streamlining the user interface. As you can see, there's only 3 tabs on the ribbon right now: Project, Home, and Add-in. And it's a very limited set of controls. So it's a very streamlined, focused user interface. Plus, just like we said, including other capabilities of add-ins like a custom doc pane. Okay, so what is an ArcGIS Pro configuration? It includes all the functionality of an add-in, plus a lot of user interface and startup experience customization capabilities. For example, you can change the application title and the icon. You can also change the application splash screen, the start page, and the about page. And you can add additional customization of the user interface. For example, as we saw, you can streamline the user interface and remove tabs off the ribbon that you may not be using. A couple screenshots here. Here's the default start page with Pro. And then on the right is a custom start page. And this is an earlier version of the ArcGIS Pro for Intelligence configuration, or as it's known now, ArcGIS Pro Intelligence, with its project selection carousel on the start page. These are the customizations are packaged just like add-ins into a single compressed file, but in this case it'll have the Pro config X file extension, and those are stored at the path that you see here, just below the standard well-known folder for Pro add-ins, but it's a additional configurations folder. All right, so with configurations, again, you have the add-in capabilities with further additional capabilities: the custom startup user experience, the splash screen, and this is the config with map community sample. And this is an example of a custom splash screen right here, and custom start page. And you can vary the user interface and user experience based on the user role. So it's something additional that you can build up into that startup experience and really take advantage of a really streamlined workflow just for that type of user. In terms of documentation, there is a Pro concepts document. So all of the foundational concepts and introductory principles of using this extensibility pattern is found in the Pro concepts doc. There's a Pro guide which provides you a full walkthrough of creating a configuration right from the starter template and refining the configuration manager class to do some interesting things. And we have 2 samples that are available that we discussed and showed you earlier: the config with map and config with start wizard. Let's compare add-ins and configurations. So in terms of similarities, they're both built from SDK project templates. They're both compiled and deployed with the standard double-click installation, and they both allow for customization of the user interface. Just some differences here: add-ins allow multiple. With an add-in, you can have multiple add-ins per Pro session. But with a configuration, you have just one configuration per Pro session, and then you can include as many add-ins as you'd like in addition to that. And with a configuration, you have the Startup and Pro user UI and UX customization capabilities. Okay, our next extensibility pattern is plugin data sources. And here you'll be able to take a custom data source and integrate it with ArcGIS Pro. You may have your own custom data source that you'd like to have in Pro as a feature layer or as a standalone table. And this is the capability that you'll want to take advantage of to do that. So the plugin data source framework, it allows developers to make those custom data sources available for use in Pro. Access in Pro is read-only. So you won't be able to edit these feature layers, these data sources using standard Pro tools, but you'll still be able to use them in other ways. The access is in the form of tables or feature classes, and it's file-based. So examples of custom data sources that you might be able to take advantage of: image files, GPS data, perhaps a proprietary file format that you have. Okay, so ArcGIS supports data from a large variety of data sources and formats, from shapefiles to Oracle databases. The plugin data sources allows you to access and use other data sources that are unsupported out of the box, like relational databases such as MySQL, non-relational databases, and other proprietary and file-based data stores that you may have, and incorporate those and again use them in Pro like those feature layers and standalone tables. There is documentation that's available. The Pro Concepts Introduction and Concepts are available. There's a Pro guide that provides a full walkthrough of building a plugin data source, as well as there are samples that you can try and incorporate into your own work and build on. All right, so our last extensibility pattern is core host applications. These are standalone applications for 64-bit geodatabase and geometry access. In the screenshots here, you can see we have a Windows console application on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we can see that this is a WPF application. And this is one of our community samples called the Geodatabase File Geodatabase Reader. And we're looking at the World Lakes geodatabase feature class and looking at that in table view. So just a couple examples of how you can use geodatabase capabilities here from a core host application, which is outside of ArcGIS Pro. These are standalone applications. So a few notes here. So standalone applications are using a subset of the Pro assemblies. You'll be able to take advantage of ArcGIS.CoreHost, which allows you to manage core host functions with these standalone applications. And you'll be using ArcGIS Core.Core assembly, which includes the geodatabase and geometry classes. So you can essentially find yourself. So with this said, because you just have access to one of the assemblies, the number of classes that you have access to is limited. You'll be able to definitely work with the geodatabase and geometry classes. And again, the core host application options are Windows consoles and WPF applications. So in terms of doing work here, you can imagine that you may be working with a scheduled routine, something maybe that runs on a nightly basis and updates your organization's geodatabase. The core host application might be a good option for you in this sort of situation. There's also documentation about editing in standalone mode and some considerations for that. There is, of course, a Pro concept document here with an introduction and discussion of the concepts, as well as a few samples that you can try and build on as well. Okay, our next section we're going to talk a little bit about the ArcGIS Pro APIs. Up till now, we've been talking about the SDK and how each one of the extensibility patterns is built on a framework of a project template that's been made available through the SDK, which is an integration with Visual Studio. Here we're going to be talking more in terms of the actual APIs, which are installed directly with ArcGIS Pro. And you can see on the screenshot here, we have a number of different categories of working with functionality of Pro. And they're named after some of the functional areas, like for example, the new Parcel Fabric API at Pro 2.7, as well as the Voxel Layers API at 2.7 as well. So the ArcGIS Pro APIs and assemblies. Again, with ArcGIS Pro, the Pro APIs assemblies, the core and extensions assemblies, are installed directly with Pro. This is a little bit different from ArcObjects. With the ArcObjects SDK, it would be a separate installation that would include not only the Visix files, providing the Visual Studio integration, but also the extension assemblies. And so it was a fairly large download. The SDK is fairly lightweight because you can download it directly from the Visual Studio Marketplace and start working with it there. And in this case, the extension assemblies are built right in with Pro and are released with each major release of Pro. In terms of the extension assemblies and some of the API categories, some of these do have some equivalents. In this case, we're looking at editing. But in other cases, for example, the geodatabase work and the different API categories here, be taking advantage of the core assemblies, ArcGIS.core. So the APIs are categorized and named by functional areas, and there is a Pro APIs listing by assembly that's on the SDK doc wiki. All right, here's the ArcGIS Pro API. You can see this is on the GitHub documentation wiki. There's a listing of the core and extension assemblies, plus a description of each of the different capabilities and the different APIs that are used within these. In looking at the ArcGIS.core DLL, it provides access to the SIM, which is the cartographic information model, which is used for customizing many different user interface aspects of Pro, the geodatabase, geometry, and utility network APIs, and all the classes that are found there. Okay, so the API reference guide document. This is the best place to actually get the full view of all of the capabilities, the namespaces by assembly, and all of the classes and methods that participate in the full API for each namespace. Here is the ArcGIS.core assembly, and you can take a look at some of the namespaces here. We took a look at the ArcGIS.core namespace. Again, this is for a lot of geodatabase capabilities. And on the right-hand side here, I wanted to show you that there's the documentation wiki menu for the geodatabase group. Many of the Pro concepts that are found in this geodatabase document, let's open that up here. Okay, so here's the functionality that's used by the geodatabase API. And this is found, as we were just talking about, in the ArcGIS.core DLL. And it's commonly used in conjunction with map exploration, map authoring, and editing. And this document has a full introduction to all of the different capabilities of the API with code snippets and how you'd use it. All right, so this has been just a quick overview of the ArcGIS Pro APIs and how they're used in relation to the SDK and different approaches for extending Pro. Now let's take a look at some resources for your work. The first place as you get started with the ArcGIS Pro SDK is the SDK landing page. Okay, so here we are at pro.arcgis.com and we are on the SDK tab. And right at the top, you see quick links to what's new, the API reference, the community samples, the documentation, the FAQ, and a link to the instructor-led training class. So lots of helpful quick links. There are ArcGIS tutorials that are available for the SDK, and we have over 12 quick walkthrough tutorials that you can try as you get started. We have quick links to many of the key concept documents. These are the Pro concept guides. We have a quick link to the Pro SDK group on GeoNet. We also have a number of Pro SDK videos that are available on YouTube. And then we finally have some recent blog posts that you can get some updates on. Okay, next in terms of resources are the samples and documentation. We have a full set of community samples for you that are available on GitHub. These are ready to use C# solutions, and we have code snippets for all of the different patterns and APIs. Let's take a quick look at the community samples. So the community samples site has been designed and categorized by these folders, which are the different APIs. Let's take a look here under the map authoring folder. And you can see down here the graphic tools sample. And this is a new sample that was made available at 2.7 to take advantage of some of the graphic layer API capabilities. There's a full walkthrough on how to use the sample. The sample itself provides a workflow for interacting with some of the sample data, which is a CDC social vulnerability index sample data set, which could be helpful for a health-related workflow, and provides some different tools here on a new graphics markup tab on the ribbon. So provides a number of different ways to show how to create map tools, editing tools, and use those in a sample. And this is something that you can incorporate to your work and get started with building on top of this. All of the samples can be downloaded as one package from GitHub here, just right from this green code button. And the sample data that accompanies it, you can click on the releases button here, scroll down, and here's the latest set of sample data that was made available at the end of last year. All right, so here's just a few screenshots of some of the community samples that are available on the community samples site. The next document is the API reference. Okay, let's just take a quick look at the Pro SDK API reference. Here in this first document, you can get an overview of the Pro SDK here in this document. It's very similar to the Wikipedia page, the first page on the wiki. There is the What's New for Developers page, which you can click on here. It's What's New at 2.7. What's nice about this page is it gives a full tabular listing of all of the changes that have been made to each one of the namespaces. So you can see new classes that have been added and so forth, new methods, and scroll through and search on each one of those namespaces. So that's a nice resource there. Here in the ArcGIS.core namespace, we had taken a quick look at this before. Let's take a look at ArcGIS.core.data. Let's just click on the database class, and you can see you get an object model, syntax, remarks in terms of the different descriptions here about using the class. And you can see here, you can click on the methods and get down to working with those and find different information on using each one of those methods. All right, so that's just a little bit of information to introduce you to the API reference. The concept and guide documents that are on GitHub. This is really a great resource to getting at all of the conceptual and walkthrough guide documentation. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a menu for walking through the different areas, framework, content, and so forth, all the different API categories. Links to guide documents, as you can see. There's snippets associated with most all of the API categories, and lots of different links that you can use to get started with the documentation. Okay, so the Pro SDK group on GeoNet is a very active community where you can collaborate with other developers and Esri staff. You can ask questions and search on threads, provide your feedback here on the SDK, and we also post product updates. One of the best learning opportunities that's available as you get started with the SDK is the formal instructor-led training. It's a comprehensive 3-day course where you can really jumpstart your development. So you can go to the actual page here, the Extending ArcGIS Pro with Add-ins page, and register. And we do have some upcoming courses in April and June. As you're looking at the future of doing development with Pro, a great resource for you is the ArcGIS Pro roadmap document that's hosted on GeoNet. It shows what's coming in terms of near-term, mid-term, and long-term, and provides descriptions of each one of these different new capabilities that are coming. Okay, just wanted to walk through some recent updates with the SDK to show you some of the new capabilities that you could take advantage of here. 2.7 was a very significant release, and we had a number of new APIs. We had device location, which allows you to manage new GNSS device connections, GPS, parcel fabric, ability to create new tools and work with parcel fabric workflows. Topology, many users have been looking for the opportunity to work with topology rules and the topology graph, as well as voxel layers, where you can create and manage voxel layer slices, sections, and ISO services. We always have enhancements to existing APIs with each release, and here we had some enhancements to layouts, reports, editing, and the geodatabase API, where there was a pre-release DDL API for schema creation made available at 2.7, where you can test creating and deleting of tables and feature classes. I just wanted to walk through some opportunities and considerations for our Esri business partners and add-ins. The ArcGIS Marketplace has Pro add-ins that are available for you as a user to download. There are free and trial add-ins that you can take a look at. And I mentioned a few of these earlier in the presentation. Some of the listings are free and paid, so you as a partner have some opportunities to list these, and also as a user, potentially to find new capabilities that might enhance your workflows with their tools. And I'd like to show you just a couple of the recent add-ins that have been made available on the marketplace. First is the Hawkeye Radio Frequency Data Explorer add-in for ArcGIS Pro. It's developed by Hawkeye 360. There's a number of focus areas that they look into here, like asset tracking and analysis. The emphasis is to allow Hawkeye 360 users the ability to simplify their workflows in using their data, their RF data and analytics. It extends Pro by putting a custom tab on the user interface and providing custom tools for loading and searching that RF signal data using different tools here, like such as this doc pane. And then they've provided this summary timeline to identify trends and patterns of the data that's been available in the visible extent. So it's a very interesting tool, and they've taken advantage of a number of the different APIs in the SDK that have been made available. They've definitely taken advantage of content and working with and interacting with data that gets pulled in and used on top of Pro and how it's used here. As well as the framework category, they've used the map authoring and map exploration APIs. Next is the Planet ArcGIS add-in version 2. Planet has focused in on situational awareness here, asset tracking analysis, and other focus areas. Their main emphasis is to support users that need to search and access streaming and downloading of Planet imagery and base maps. Like the add-in you just saw, they've extended a tab on the Pro user interface with their custom tools. They have an image search doc pane here, which allows users to search and build in workflow tasks with these custom doc panes. And they have map tools for defining the area of extent and other tasks. And some of the APIs that they've taken advantage of here are content, map authoring, and sharing. And so these cases are interesting because they show some of the capabilities of the SDK and how organizations can make the capabilities available to their users, as well as provide some ideas for you as a developer as you build your add-ins. All right, some other opportunities here at Dev Summit. We have on the ArcGIS Pro track 3 Simu-Live sessions, which include live question and answer. We have the Road Ahead session, ArcGIS Pro, Introduction to the Parcel Fabric API, and regression testing your ArcGIS Pro add-in. The Developer Summit sessions that are on demand, like this one, you can see from practical doc pane design and implementation, all the way down to an overview of the voxel layer API, which is new at 2.7. Finally, you can search on the ArcGIS Pro SDK in the detailed agenda for the Dev Summit website for more sessions on the SDK that are offered by different Pro teams. Finally, leaving you with a number of ArcGIS Pro resources. You can see that you can go to pro.arcgis.com, get to the SDK landing page and find other Pro-related documentation. Go to esri.com/training for different training classes. On YouTube, you can find what's new and all of the different ArcGIS Pro 2.7 sessions, as well as developer sessions from earlier Developer Summit conferences for the Pro SDK. You can go to the samples site and download the community samples. Go to GeoNet and access the ArcGIS Pro and the ArcGIS Pro SDK groups and collaborate with the community there. And go to learn.arcgis.com and find many ArcGIS Pro related Learn lessons so you can get started with the capabilities of ArcGIS Pro. We look forward to your feedback. Customer feedback drives the ArcGIS Pro SDK development. We're always encouraging new requirements and workflows that they would support. And so for feedback and questions, you could go to the Pro SDK group on GeoNet that we mentioned before, or you could contact me directly, and here's my email address. We're also encouraging ideas on the ArcGIS Pro Ideas site on GeoNet, and you can use the SDK label. All of the ArcGIS Pro SDK for .NET sessions are going to be hosted at this link on GitHub, and you'll be able to find, for all of the technical sessions I mentioned, all of the slides and sample code. Okay, thank you for attending this session, and please do provide your feedback for the session by clicking on the session survey link directly below the video. Well, thank you very much for attending this session, and hope you have a great Developer Summit and take advantage of all of the Pro SDK resources we talked about.